Welcome to Discordant Harmony, the podcast where Jason and I dive into the issues that stir discord in our culture and churches. Our hope is to offer Christian men and women a voice of reason and faith to critically think and respond in a way that honors God without taking ourselves too seriously. In this episode, we discuss the Royals, Barnacles, Kristi Noem, Russel Brand, Antisemitism, and AI. Buckle up, here's episode 3. Here we are, episode number 3, our third week into this endeavor.
How about that?
I'm feeling good about things. I wore my Royals cap today since you gave me grief the other day about the Astros.
I don't know what you're going to do with that. So then
I went to a Royals game after we talked about how the Royals had such a great April.
Yep.
And I went to a Royals game last Saturday night.
And you didn't invite me.
I didn't invite you. Well, it was with Andrea and her work. They bought the tickets.
Oh.
So that would have been a little awkward.
Well, you didn't text me back that explanation as to why.
You know, I just wanted you to feel a little hurt. I don't know.
Okay. Thanks, Fred.
But you also kind of said you've given up on the Royals a little bit too. So I don't know what to think, Jason.
No, I gave up when they were crappy, and now I'm more interested.
Well, guess what?
Okay, go on.
We went to the game. We went to the game Saturday night after they had beaten the Rangers the night before, and it was a little bit of a thing because Andrea's coworker who got the tickets, he's a Rangers fan, so it was kind of one of those things.
Okay.
Well, of course, my luck continues. I go and the Royals laid a giant egg, and they were beaten 15-4.
Ouch.
So, and it was a little chilly. So by the end of the 7th inning, I was like, I think I'm done.
But you still have this record-breaking season thus far. And it's interesting.
Yeah, they're 17 wins in April was a record for number of wins in April.
And meanwhile, your team is maybe being offered up for sale or not being willing to.
They're not going to be sold, but their pitching staff is just garbage right now for the Houston.
And the
Astros.
GM is off in left field.
It should remind me, and Astros fans, just how lucky we've been for them to win to go to 17 ALCSs in a 17 to go to 7. That would be amazing.
Look at this fan.
Whoa. No,
truly a fanatic.
It should remind us. It should remind us how lucky we've been to have our team go to 7 ALCSs in a row.
Oh,
that's
whether it be cheating or not.
Oh, here we go.
But it yeah, absolutely. Take it while you have it.
Yeah.
And it's awesome.
All right, let's move on. We don't have to talk any more baseball. Let's talk.
Yeah, well, because, we had given, I forcefully gave a disclaimer that we wouldn't talk baseball anymore. Clearly, we're not, with Clay wearing a Royals hat, and not Chiefs, obviously. Wearing a Royals hat, and now we're talking Astros baseball. But, so you brought
up the Astros.
We won't be able to get away. No, you brought it up. You brought up the Royals because you were wearing.
I brought up the Royals. I didn't bring up the Astros.
Well, but
okay,
that's your team, or maybe I don't know. I don't know what to do with you.
Well, both of them. You have to understand when I moved to Kansas.
Yeah, explain to the audience why you are wearing.
When I moved to Kansas City in 1997.
Okay. So you've been here for what, 26 years?
Yeah, something like that. Whatever it is. 23. I don't know. No, more than that. Yeah, 26, 27 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can do math
because
my biochem degree being put into practice.
Well, this year is my 25th. This year is my 25th. This is my 25th wedding anniversary this fall. So, and I moved to Kansas City before that. Now, when I moved to Kansas City, the Astros are still in the National League.
Okay.
And there wasn't a lot of interleague play at that point. It was still kind of a rarity. So the Astros and the Royals didn't really ever face each other. So there was no bad blood. I
think that's approved amongst fandom. If you go to the opposite league, it's all right. It's when it's interleague or
interdivision.
And
the Royals weren't that good at the time, but I was like, well, I like baseball, and I could listen to them on the radio and go to games with people. And it's like, okay, so I developed a little bit of a fanhood for them, and obviously when they went to the World Series, that was really cool, and I was glad to be a part. I got to go to a playoff game during that run, which was a really cool experience to go to a playoff game.
Yeah.
It was a game that they won the series.
Yeah, so George Brett was still around then.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because this was post-World Series. Yes.
No, I'm not talking about George Brett. I'm talking about whenever they went to 2015.
Oh, well, you said you moved in 97, so I'm trying to backtrack because we won in 95.
No, 85.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep, 85.
There we go.
Brett had retired by the time I got here.
You're not that old.
Not that old.
I know, because
I
that's
remember,
the year I was born.
I remember watching George Brett playing baseball. But
All right, so you're not that old. Okay, now we're talking. So yeah, we were probably at similar games back then.
oh, yeah.
So anyways, all right, moving on. So can I introduce my topic that I want to talk about?
Yes. You have anything top of the head?
My off-the-top remarks that I'd like to introduce. So we're 3 episodes in. One of the things I'd like to introduce as a bit is an animal fact of the day.
Oh, an animal fact.
That-
We need like a
Yes.
little jingle for that.
Yeah, get a little ditty. Figure out that I want animal sounds.
Animal
But beyond that, it's okay, how does the animal fact that I have relate to the world on the whole, or something having to do with our
So we're going to
lives?
get deep. It's not just going to be an animal fact. It's going to be an animal fact that's somehow
relevant to our
bringing-
conversation, maybe.
deep thoughts.
All right, so here you go.
Okay.
So did you know that the barnacle has a penis?
Like barnacles, like the things that stick on the side of boats.
Yes.
They have penises.
8 times the size of their bodies.
What in the world?
Do you want to move on? We can just leave it at that.
Well, this is interesting. Hey, I do have children in my house, You're talking
Would you like to know why it's relevant to our conversation?
Yes, I do.
So the reason it's relevant, in my mind, is, so I've been thinking about this. So my youngest dog, the matriarch, or not the matriarch, what do you call it?
Is it a man? I mean, is it a boy dog?
That's why I said, yeah,
he's-
it's a
he's
man.
a
It's not a matriarch, because that's
patriarch.
Zola.
Patriarch.
Zola.
Patriarch.
Zola's the woman.
Yeah.
She is the matriarch
Then there's
of the family.
Then there's the patriarch.
Then the patriarch. Is that how it goes?
Yes, it's exactly how. It
What?
goes.
Those are 2 words are met together? Matriarch and patriarch?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. What does this have to do with the barnacle's penis?
Because my dog lost his balls 2 days ago.
That's unfortunate.
So he's in mourning. He's very sad.
yeah.
But we currently have
The
an
other dogs.
active
The other
litter.
dogs in the neighborhood are pointing at him, pointing fingers.
We just
at him.
have, okay, we, unfortunately, the matriarch got impregnated while nursing our last litter, which was the purpose of even bringing him into the household in the first place. But after that,
You wanted to have babies.
we wanted to try
Okay.
and see if that was something for us.
like to sell or just so you
Yeah,
have
to
1,000
sell
dogs
and
around
then
the house?
maybe
Okay.
have one more dog. But okay, could we do a side business or something? Because we like puppies. It's this
What kind of
whole
dogs
thing.
are these?
We have a Morkie and a Yorkie. So Finn, the male,
Yeah.
is a Yorkie, and then we have Zola, who is a Morkie.
And you thought that people would want to buy these animals?
I thought so. It was harder than I thought, and the birth was way harder than we thought in the first one.
Mm-hmm.
One try, it was game over.
now you're done.
From Chelsea, my wife. She X'd it. We're not doing this anymore. But
She came out with the knife the next day and was, come here, little.
I get,
come here,
well,
you little
she was
Morkie."
ready to say we're done doing this, but I assumed, similar to how humans operate, that you could not impregnate a dog while still breastfeeding. That's not true, because we caught them multiple times.
I think human women can get pregnant while they're breastfeeding as well.
Really,
Yeah.
I didn't think that was. So maybe I'm just way off base.
I have to confirm this with my wife. She's a
Yeah,
nurse.
you can go ask. But we caught them off in the corner of our house, and sure enough, they were pregnant again. And so then we have 4 new beautiful baby puppies that should be out of our house in 2 weeks or so. But we got the snip for Finn.
He's gone.
He is now no longer able to reproduce.
He's lost his manhood.
And he has been cuddling with me.
Turned in his man card.
Yep, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. He still has a penis, but...
Well, sure. I understand how it works. I understand how...
Tune in next week when we have an interesting fact about a vagina. Do you have something else to bring to us today?
How can I top that?
I've got something, please.
Okay.
I got one more thing.
All
So,
right.
Kristi Noem, you familiar with this lady?
She's a politician, and she wrote a book.
South Dakota. She's
South Dakota.
Yeah, she's in South Dakota.
But she wrote like a memoir.
Memoir
Yeah.
recently.
But she's been in the news.
Never going
because
back. is the name of the memoir.
She's been in the news because apparently
she shot and killed her 14-month-old dog.
That's what it is. Yeah, she shot her dog, and she wrote about it in the memoir. And then people are like,
she wrote it because she wrote about the dog because
South Dakota. She is South Dakota.
Yes.
Yeah, I would imagine people shoot their dogs a lot in South Dakota.
I guess, but the whole thing was the dog was having such a good time while going hunting, but didn't go and get the birds, but just jumping around. And then when they got back home, he went and killed a neighborhood chicken.
Oh.
And that warranted then the killing of that dog. And she was fine with that.
I think dog owners prefer to say they had to put him down.
I don't care. You killed the 14-month-old, like, obviously we just talked about puppies. I cannot imagine.
All right, so she killed her, but so what? Does that mean
she also killed a goat?
Does that mean that she's
That's not my point. That's not what I'm bringing. So then, as within the book, she also wrote about how, and I can bring up the official quote about how.
Yeah, we only want official quotes. We don't want unofficial quotes on the Discord.
So that
podcast.
She claims that when she was serving as a low-ranking congresswoman, she met with North Korean dictator.
Wait, she used those words, a low-ranking congresswoman?
Yep, this is quoting from...
how sad. She was a low-ranking congresswoman.
She met with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. Through my tenure on the House Armed Services Committee, I had the chance to travel to many countries to meet with world leaders. As I remember, when I met with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, I'm sure he underestimated me, having no clue about my experience staring down little tyrants. I'd been a children's pastor after all.
Oh,
that's why I wanted to bring this
That's
topic.
A nice line. Did she go to North Korea? Like, I don't think...
No, she in fact did not. So she's been called on that sense. So that's been the big topic.
Where did she meet him?
She did not meet him.
Oh, nowhere?
Nowhere.
So she just sort of...
So my beef...
Like, this was a nice Sunday school story she made up here? Or?
Well, so she got confused, as she's explained it, as she's been called out before, is other Asian. So now we have
funny how politicians.
So now we have racism, and when it got brought to my attention, isms, and it's just this thing where, okay, first and foremost, my biggest thing is, of course, we've got a bearing.
Hey, did you see the new Jaguar I've got out in my driveway?
No.
I don't know a Jaguar. I'm sorry, I got confused. It's not a Jaguar. It's not a Jaguar.
Okay, I was going to say,
it's a Ford.
Okay.
I mean, how did I mess that up?
To the outward audience, this guy has the worst driveway I've ever experienced. Of any of my friends, it's just this big old slant. Beautiful house.
It's like a 60-degree.
But
it's not.
But the driveway
feels like that.
The driveway is just...
Hey, deal with it in the winter.
I'm slanting and trying to open up my door, and the door's slamming on my leg. Anyways, okay, so the point that I wanted to bring up was, first and foremost, of course, Christians take us stray because you were a children's pastor, now you're this person. You're lying in a book. Second thing, came out recently that you also did the audiobook, and you read this out for everybody to then be able to digest, and it had to be brought to your attention. And it's just like, oh, come on.
All right, so I guess there's one thing if you were to be able to go back and say, oh, I have a ghostwriter, because these people don't write their own books, right? They have ghostwriters who do this most of the time.
I guess.
Let's assume
But this is a very specific story.
I understand. So let's say she had a ghostwriter, and the ghostwriter made a mistake, pulled wrong information. I don't know. I'm just going to give her the benefit of the doubt. But what you're saying is, when she's reading this in her audiobook, she should have, something should have gone, whoa, wait a minute.
I didn't meet that man.
I didn't do that.
And I didn't use this very specific reference that I was a children's pastor.
I mean, that's different than, somebody at church, and they say, have we met before? And I'm not sure.
Yeah, actually, we did when we were in Europe and France.
But
on vacation together.
Yeah, something like that.
I don't know.
What my point is, this is Kim Jong-un. It's not like it's a... Did I meet that
One
guy
of very few amounts of people are even allowed to go and visit. There's literally a handful of American politicians that have been able to go there.
Dennis Rodman he got to meet him.
That is true.
Whatever that tells you.
Well, maybe his memoir has more truthful facts.
Now, what would be amazing if Dennis Rodman was actually a children's pastor?
Then we have... Dude, I've got another thing. So that reminds me. So if Dennis Rodman becomes a children's pastor, I want to go to that church because that dude has had a remarkable transformation from marrying Madonna to then becoming a children's pastor. But Russel Brand just became a Christian.
I saw that.
So that happened last week.
I saw that.
So that's interesting also.
It is. I saw, you sent me a picture of him getting baptized in the Thames.
Yep.
Right. That's pretty cool. He got baptized in the Thames, and it was Bear Grylls who baptized him?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah.
So to me, it's just very fascinating. So I've followed him for a little while, and he kind of runs around with the camps of Jordan Peterson and some of the strong-willed voices of our...
That's a very kind way of putting that.
Of our current culture. But
Ben Shapiro's in that mix.
Yeah, he is in the mix, and I think Trump's not too far off.
You know, Jordan Peterson, by the way, he's one of those guys. He needs to poop or get off the pot with his faith. He seems like he just like, well, I don't want to tell you. I'm just going to keep you guessing, and maybe that's just like a part of the shtick. But anyway, I would love to see the vulnerability that Russel Brand has showed. So I've been following him for a little while, and so over the last few months, especially, he has landed on this idea of Christianity being the most realistic and applicable faith that he's ever experienced in his life. Nice.
And so then watching this discovery real time over social media has been very interesting to me. And so the only reason I bring it up is so that he became a Christian about a week ago, just got baptized. And so now it's this deconstruction where now that I'm a Christian, what do I think about the system? And so I'm very interested to see how he then takes this.
Do you see in this, do you see a lot of skeptics, people who are like, because I've noted in the past that it's interesting because we could send our 14-year-old to summer camp and they come back after a week at summer camp, staying up way too late, eating too much, candy, and, flirting with the opposite sex and just, you know what I'm saying, just having a good time at camp.
I remember youth camp.
And then they come home and, Mom, Dad, I had a come to Jesus moment at camp, and I prayed and I gave my life to Jesus, and I got baptized and we sang songs, and, as a parent, you're immediately, that's wonderful.
Sure.
We don't doubt that at all. We don't doubt that experience at all. But when a celebrity or a kind of a known entity says, "Hey, I've decided I'm going to follow Jesus," I always find there's a large amount of skepticism. Like, I don't know if that's really real with this.
Sure. And especially
they've got to prove it to me.
Sure.
Kind of
well, and especially with somebody like Russel Brand, who, like, for those of you that have seen Forgetting Sarah Marshall, like when he literally portrays himself within the movie, like there's just this smorgasbord of your tattoos don't make sense. You've explored all these things. You're debaucherous. You do all these things. And now you're at this place where after all this life you've lived, you've now found Christianity.
So are you
there's
saying,
a resentment potentially.
Are you saying that he's changed his brand?
Oh my. There's a pun.
Pun intended.
Look at that.
Pun intended.
Add the drum beat. Maybe. But like that resentment there where that guy, okay, he's done all these things. Yes, prove it to us. But then beyond that, it's like I've been surprised by, like for me, hey, this is great. Like I'm pumped about this. But there's been a lot of people, like you go look in the comments and there's a lot of people shaming him, bringing up things of the past. And he ends every video that he does on social media with I love to know what you think. So he's good at this, obviously. So then he welcomes this feedback, and it's just, come on, just let the guy be. Like he's pursuing this. I'm just excited to follow him on that next adventure.
Well, I think there's a couple. My personal opinion on this. One is I think a lot of people have a false notion that if someone is a public figure, then that means we all have free reign to just beat on them.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
I don't think that they do. Two, I think there's a little bit maybe of way down inside our hearts is some envy. Like, oh, here's a guy who got to live the life.
Sure.
The sinful life that we all kind of, man, and he kind of got away with it. And now he gets to have Jesus and go to heaven. It's a little bit like the older brother in the prodigal son story.
Sure.
Right? I've been faithful. I've done all the faithful stuff. And then this guy comes along. Wait a minute. It doesn't seem fair.
Sure. I mean, it's the same thing of two other guys on the cross. And one guy gets to go be in heaven. And, okay, you lived this whole life, and now you get to go be with Jesus.
Boom, yeah.
Well, for me, that's not for me to judge. And you've also been able to see the consequences of sin. And,
sure, yeah.
And so then within that, the pursuit, like, to me, one of the most interesting things for Russel Brand himself is the fact that you've been able to experience these things and you're still searching. Like, you've made it to this point in your life and you're still not satisfied. Mm-hmm. Well, that's why Christ exists.
Right.
That is the fulfilling aspect. And so for him to then do all that he's done, lived the drugs, the sex, the movie star, all of that, and now you aren't satisfied and you're still searching. The fact that now he comes to Christ, it's, amen, brother, and let's see how this goes.
Yes.
So,
as Bono once said, I still haven't found what I'm searching for.
That.
Yeah.
Which is weird because he is a Christian.
Yeah, he is, but that's the... that wasn't the point.
Good example.
Yeah. Well, so I would say to people who find themselves immediately skeptical whenever a celebrity, some unknown entity says, hey, I found Jesus, maybe to borrow from John Christ, check your heart, right?
There you go.
Is there something in there that it's an envy? Because at the end of the day, you're going to say, well, that's not fair. You feel like it's not fair. But the truth is, those people, who live years and years and years in sin, they're still suffering. Yeah, they have forgiveness of their sins, but they're still suffering the consequences of their sins, consequences that you and I have thankfully not had to endure.
Yep.
We see the persona of, oh, this is all the good stuff that they've had, but obviously it's not. It's not good.
Yeah.
We know that those lifestyles are not good. They're not productive. They're not.
And we get to
they
operate
haven't had
with
blessings in
perspective of being able to operate with purpose.
Yeah.
That, how many, those meanderings that you're talking about, like how much of it is driven by the lack of understanding or the lack of purpose. Sure. That for me is what caused me to even sit here and talk to you today.
And nor should we expect Russel Brand today to have the same sort of theological formation and understanding of God's character in the Christian life that we do, because we've been walking the journey for a while.
Sure.
Right? Now, that doesn't mean that he can't get it quickly. Maybe he will. There's someone comes along and decides, it appears he's close with Bear Grylls, right? And I would imagine Bear Grylls could be a someone who could be a good mentor to him.
Yep.
Well, that's cool. That's cool. That's good stuff. By the way, just before we move on, I don't know where, it's been a while since I've read it, so I can't remember the name of it. Bear Grylls has a discipleship book. It's really cool. It's really, it's devotional, I should say. It's like a devotional. It has, a bunch of short little devotions about different things he's learned in life. And
that's interesting.
It's kind of a cool, I got it a couple years ago.
I've got a new book coming out.
Do you?
Yep.
When is it coming out?
I don't know if I want to put this out. Hopefully with my website that I have coming out, arationaltheist.com.
Well, then just put a pin on it and we'll talk about it when it comes out.
Yep. But whenever it comes out, I've got a few of them sitting there, but one of them is a daily devotional / prayer.
Then when they make the Hallmark movie of it, then we'll really be...
Yep. Perfect.
Okay,
let's move on.
Speaking of Hallmark movies,
us?
What I brought for us today, my article, and I took the AP version of it. There's the AP article talked about how the House passes an expanded definition of anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
Amongst the the campus protests we talked about
last
week, and just to kind of give people a little bit of a summary of what that is. So it's basically the House of Representatives passed this bill called the Antisemitism Awareness Act, and it's a response to all the kind of ugliness that we've seen on the, these anti-Israeli protests we've seen on campuses the last few weeks. And the idea behind the act is to give Jewish students and faculty some extra protection. They've been feeling pretty threatened, as you would imagine, through some of the things going on.
Sure.
And at the core of the act, it's really it instructs the Department of Education to use the same definition of anti-Semitism as the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, which is an actual organization that exists. So when it comes to like schools and colleges, universities, colleges, I suppose it could be applied to elementary and secondary schools too, but their mindset was colleges and universities, that whenever they're forming their discrimination policies, that they need to use this act that needs to inform them of how they use
consequences and all.
Right,
yes.
Right.
So do you have a specific mention of what it looks like, or
what
specifically do you want to talk about, I guess?
So, I think there's a couple of things with this. One, the idea behind it, the intention behind it, I applaud, to say, well, there are people that are being discriminated against, and there's violence taking place against Jewish students and faculty, and we need to help them.
Okay.
So that I completely applaud. But I think
we do not need hate speech.
We don't need hate speech. We don't need people.
Yeah.
Right. But I think what they end up doing is a little bit misguided in a couple of ways. One, there's a pretty decent chance that this thing's not going to pass muster with the with the First Amendment. I'm not going to read all of this because there's quite a lot here.
Okay.
But because it's telling the Department of Education to adopt the definitions from the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, well, when you go to that organization's website, they have quite a bit of stuff that they're packing into this.
Sure.
Just here, I'll read a couple of them. So for calling for, aiding, or justifying the killing or harming of Jews in the name of radical ideology or an extremist view of religion, okay, I can get on board with that. Accusing Jews as people of being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoing committed by a single Jewish person or group. Denying the scope and the mechanisms of, like Holocaust. If you question, there's a couple of things in here. If you basically question things
whether it happened or not,
if it happened, or the Holocaust. Accusing Jews of being more loyal to Israel than they are to the country that to like American Jews, where they're more accusing of that. There's one here that I think a lot of Christians will kind of bristle at a little bit. Using the symbols and images associated with classic anti-Semitism, i.e. claims of Jews killing Jesus, to characterize Israel or Israelis. And it goes on. There's just a lot in there. And the issue of it is, on its face, you think, oh, this isn't bad stuff, but it's...
I think we're going to land in the same place, but
it's basically, it's probably an infringement of 1A. Like, people can have their opinion.
Sure.
Or they can even have a firmly held belief that they don't like Jews and Jews do bad things. Well, I don't agree with them on that, but they have their opinion on it. So I think that's the first problem. There's a couple other problems, and I'll unpack them as much as you want me to. But the second is, I think the issue with this act is it's redundant. So there's already, the way I said it is because there's already laws on the books about discriminating people against their...
That's the first thing I thought.
Right, their race, their country of origin. You can't do that. You can't discriminate people. The problem is not, we need to have a law. We need to enforce the laws, and specifically the school policies, the anti-discrimination policies already on the policies of these schools. They're not enforcing existing law and existing policies. So just creating a new thing doesn't solve the problem. We see that oftentimes with a lot of like gun control stuff. It's always, let's just add something else, but a lot of things aren't being. And the third problem I think is, there's a lot of maybe this term is overused, but some virtue signaling going on.
That's the first thing I thought
right?
about.
Like the people voting for this, they know it's probably not going to, the Senate's not going to confirm it, and the Supreme Court might strike it down at some, like they they know it's not going to go anywhere.
It's just to get more voters.
But they can tell their voters.
Be on the right side of
right. They can tell their voters, I did something.
Sure.
Right. When the voters like, what are you doing to help protect Jewish people? I did this. I voted for this law. So I think it's a little,
All right.
That kind of stuff bothers me.
Yep. So, yeah, we're not going to disagree with this one. The initial thought I had is, okay, I thought there were already laws in place that restricted this kind of behavior.
Yeah.
And so then to see this, I think Congress is telling on itself.
We have a visitor. Bear is here to visit us.
What's up, Bear? Look at this cuddly little guy. How old is he now?
10 months, something like that.
Almost a year.
Yeah.
Hopefully none of my little ones get this old and they're out of my house.
He's already been under the knife, so.
So, yes. So with that, it's a virtual signaling, yes, the way I look at it. It's also a thanks for telling on yourself, because I don't see you doing the same thing when we hear of other prejudice or racist things coming up in the news. But this is an easy one, and this is an easy target, whether it be with the Christian audience or the Jewish audience or whoever it is that you're virtue signaling for, that this leads down a slippery slope where, one of the things that I read on a different article when you gave this to me was, so what is stopping this new law, if it would go through, the discrimination being leveraged? Like, so if I have something to say against the Israeli government, what is stopping police from saying, okay, you are using harmful language against the Israeli government?
Yeah.
If I have issues with the way Benjamin Netanyahu is conducting himself, okay, is that now hate speech? Where, no. We're not talking about anti-Semitism at that point. We are talking about how they are conducting themselves.
Well, but the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance might say that you are. See, that's where it gets.
Well, and that's so then, like,
slippy?
yesterday.
I don't know what that word is. Slippy.
Was it yesterday that they had it was the anniversary and of it's the specific Holocaust Remembrance Day, and Biden's talking about it, and the way he talks about it is insufficient in my mind. And so I don't need to go into it. But at the end of the day, you're specifically directing the idea that we will not forget what Hamas did back in October. Well, of course not. But this war has been raging for a long time. And so the actions that then the Israeli government are then conducting, like, I can't condone that behavior personally, because I think there are so many casualties. You have casualties with nonprofits, you have and their workers, you have all these different things. And so if I go out and say this, I could potentially get in trouble based on this new act if it would get applied.
If it was to be applied in a broader spectrum, this seems to be targeted a little bit more towards, Department of Education,
sure,
towards what's going on in college campuses. So
we talked about that last
theoretically,
week.
It could be. It could be more
but that just shows, okay, the colleges, universities aren't doing their job in the first place. So then, okay, Congress is all going to step up and sit there and say, okay, we're going to make sure you do your job by enacting a law. But you're just trying to make it easy. You're pushing the easy button and not actually.
Well, so I think that is one of my thoughts. When I think about what's the Christian response to this? Because I think there's probably a lot of Christians who are very favorable to the Jewish faith and to Israel, and I am. I certainly am.
As am I.
Without a doubt. And
they may be misguided. I'll come out and say, but I love all people as well as Jews. You are God's chosen people.
Yeah.
But you are misguided. There was a guy named Jesus that came. But go on.
Well, that's a whole different thing.
Go on.
All right.
Go on.
But I think there's three things when I think about from a Christian standpoint that we need to consider with this. All right. So one, I think there is a temptation to, whenever we feel like something is uncomfortable to us or we believe is immoral or against what God would want.
Yep.
There's a temptation to say, well, that should also be illegal.
Yep.
And I think there's three problems with that.
I
think one is it goes against God's character and his missional calling for us.
Yep.
So God's character is one where he has given us the opportunity to choose. All right. So I wrote down a couple of scriptures here. We see this in Joshua 24, for example. Joshua 24:15, people know it pretty well from when Joshua says at the end, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Well, the beginning of that verse, he's basically saying, well, hey, I'll read it. He says, but if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day which you'll serve. He's basically saying, look, here's your choice. You can serve the Lord or you can't. And you get to choose. And I think that speaks to the heart of God. He gives us a choice. He wants us to come and serve him. He wants us to fulfill our moral obligations and to be righteous and holy people. But he's not, I don't think that he set up governments for that purpose, to force us into doing it.
Sure.
Right? And there's other scriptures that I think support the same thing. And then when I say his missional calling to us is, I think his missional calling is for us to go out into, the world and to baptize and teach and make disciples. I don't think it says go out into the world, find all the people who do things wrong and throw them into jail.
Sure.
Right? We're supposed to teach. Right? And through our teaching and our discipleship, then people get those instructions, and then they choose to be righteous people, or they choose not to.
Yep.
If that's what they choose. And so don't hear me say I'm letting sin off the hook, immorality off the hook. What I'm saying is I think there's a temptation there to kind of press that easy button and say, as a Christian, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to wait in this. I don't want to have to take the time and the effort to change hearts and minds. I would just rather throw people into jail that I find are misaligned with me.
Sure. Well, because on the baseline, we have the fact, I will call it a fact, that what I see most people doing is taking the easy way out and not doing the basic steps of, okay, what would it take for me to influence culture? That this is a cultural problem. Yes, it's complicated. Mm-hmm. How do you get people to stop being racist? How do you stop people from hate speech?
And you can make laws from here to end of time.
You're not going to stop anybody.
You're not going to stop that, right?
I mean, obviously, there's plenty of racism abounding in America.
There's enough laws in the books already, like we said earlier.
But beyond that, to me, that there's a reconciliation as to the listener at this point, where I think the best we can do, whether the law is in place or not, is to take the situation and say, okay, how do I show compassion and love in the midst of these situations? I don't need a law to make that happen. And I don't need a law to call somebody out if we see it happening in our context. Like if we see bigotry, if we see anti-Semitism, just go stop it, call it out. Like that's how we make actual change. We don't whether you're not going to sit there in that moment and say, okay, this new law passed, it's going to let me now say this in a forceful manner. It's already a law in the first place.
I'm not even sure it's that. It's there's a law out there, so some police or someone else will come and take care of it. I don't have to deal with it.
Sure.
It's not my responsibility.
It's just not a good faith argument in my mind. It's laughable. When you sent it to me, it's just I literally rolled my eyes.
And my other and honestly, my other issue I think that should be a concern for Christians with this is when we more and more we allow government to become the arbiters of what's moral or not. When we give them that permission, well, I guess that works as long as they're on our side. But the second that they're not, then this double backs on us, right? I mean, there's an example of this in here where you could begin to make an argument that if someone were to say on a street corner, Jesus is the only way to reconciliation with God, oh, well, maybe that's hate speech. Maybe that's anti-Semitic speech. Someone might make that argument. So my point is we have to be very careful because if we make this bed, we might have to lie in it at some point.
Yeah, and I think, yes, absolutely. And it's just, it shows the lack of conviction because clearly the people that are passing this are not playing this all the way out, right, in my mind.
Right.
It's...
And I understand, yes, God, I think that there's scripture that that supports this. And I failed to write it down, so forgive me for that. But God instituted government for a purpose, to maintain order, to have justice. But I think, in my mind, I tend to side a little bit more from a libertarian standpoint of government exists for three reasons: to protect us from physical harm, financial harm, and to protect our property from damage or trespassing, right? Like you should be able to have your property and no one come on someone can yell out there, Jews are trying to genocide, whatever. They can't come into my house and do that.
Sure.
I can tell them, you have to leave my house, right? There's no First Amendment, right? That you can come into someone's house, or for that matter, I know it gets squirrely when you start talking about public education public places, right? And that's why schools they can have rules around, I forget what they're called, but like time and space policies where you can give people opportunities to speak their mind, but you can put some certain parameters around it that don't distinguish this group gets more time or space than this group over here, because that becomes discrimination.
Okay.
That really was at the heart of a lot of what was going on with these campuses, because once someone pitches a tent and they say, this is mine, well, then now you're
disrupting everything. Yep.
No one else the other side can't really speak, and you're putting this disruption. So anyway, that's a long way. I think as Christians, we should be aware of that. And I wanted to point out the fact that it's not a good thing in my mind. Others might have a different opinion, but that's where I land on it.
I'm there with you. So the discordance isn't between us. We're on the same page.
You and I are in harmony.
That we are.
That's nice.
All right. I'm going to get comfortable.
Tell me about your article. Get comfortable and tell me about your article.
So my article.
Okay.
It is about AI. So there's been a big topic.
What if only AI could have mowed your yard for you?
If I get a robot that could know how to do that.
A robot, they're going to be out there.
Well, there are those ones that go by themselves and just go.
True.
They're like the Roombas.
They're like a Roomba, but they work in your yard.
Yeah, I should. Yeah, those are expensive, but I'd love one of those.
I would imagine. That's usually how these things work. I'm sure the first Roombas were expensive, and now more people have them.
I have one. I got gifted one. I do have one.
Wow.
But the problem is I have steps, and so they can't go up the steps. So I have small areas that they can work in, but I have to move them every time. Anyway.
Oh, no.
All right, so AI.
What a plane. You got to move.
So the article that I brought is a Barna research poll article, and I guess, disclaimer, not going to sign off on all that Barna does. Partly because I feel like half the time the people that they're polling I don't trust. But the evidence for your story here is you're telling us right off the bat it's not trustworthy. Well, you'll see when I have my point that I'm going to make. So I guess we can agree to disagree right off the bat.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just trying to get clarity.
The title of the article is 3 Takeaways on How Pastors Can Use AI. And so this is a segment I'd like to call Jason Reads, just to give you some of the stats. So 3 in 4 U.S. pastors, 77%, based on their statistics, agree that God can work through AI. Many pastors are beginning to see AI as a helpful tool for administrative needs of the church, and there's growing potential to use the pulpit as a way to shepherd congregations in the wise use of AI-based tools. Nearly 9 in 10 pastors say they'd be comfortable utilizing AI within the realm of assisting in graphic design, and over 3/4, 78%, are okay using technology to assist with marketing and marketing materials. The next point I've got here with the statistics is only 1 in 10 pastors, 12%, based on their statistics, are comfortable using AI to write sermons, though 2 in 5, 43%, see its merits in sermon prep and research. And so then the last thing I wanted to bring is there are a few interesting outliers in the discussion of the church and AI. Over half of Gen Z Christians, 57%, would like to hear from their pastor on using AI in personal communication. Meanwhile, only 14% of pastors feel this topic is a very important one to be teaching on.
So there's a couple of things here.
There's a lot there. So Jason's done reading.
So I'm going to summarize, make sure I heard it right. So there's a number of areas where pastors feel relatively comfortable using AI. So
yes.
Administrative purposes, that sort of thing. Even in the help of research, although it's less than 50%.
Sure.
But very few, 10% actually want to use AI for the writing of their sermon. So before we get into the whole how the congregation's feelings are about this, why do you think that's the case? That pastors they're comfortable with AI with these elements, but not when it comes to writing the sermon itself.
Well, I think the first part, more or less, if we cut right to it, I'm very interested in the 9 out of 10 people that don't have seeing AI as something that I would leverage for my sermon writing. Mm-hmm. Mostly because they're, my guess, if I just put it all out there, and this, I guess the purpose why I brought this article, is that I think they are insecure in their role at their church. Because at the end of the day, if we bring it to the meta conversation, I've already accepted AI is here in our culture. It's here to be leveraged. It's a tool that's been given to us, whether it be by human beings creating technology or technology now escalating, or is that the right word?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, escalating what's possible. That for me, why not use a tool? It ultimately boils down to the discernment of those pastors themselves. Mm-hmm. Like as a congregation member, I don't really care where a pastor would get their research from, or even how they write their sermons.
You don't care if the research comes to the Bible or not?
Well, okay, yes, sure.
Okay.
But, okay, so let me, yeah. So
just had a poke on you there.
Yeah, there's, but.
I get what you're saying, though.
But what I was going to say is.
How they conduct
research. I will then discern their theology upon delivery. Like, based on what they then go and regurgitate or something. And so that's part of, I guess, the nature of this whole conversation, where I'm well-read in Scripture, and having worked on staff, been a pastor, and actively give sermons myself, I take great pride in my knowledge of Scripture. And so for me, AI isn't intimidating. That, like, for me, okay, I throw some things in. I want to incorporate David. I want to incorporate Paul, and let's throw in a piece of Revelation, and let's see what AI kicks out. Mm-hmm. And I was just using that last week with our seminary gathering that we had with our leaders, where I was actively wanted to see, okay, how do we get, like, if I'd want to write a sermon that would incorporate indigenous culture and indigenous leaders into my sermon, how would AI kick this out? And I was surprised at how accurate it was as it pertained to the relevancy of the Scripture that I was using in the sermons that I was giving. Mm-hmm. All I had to do was add personal touches to what AI gave me.
Sure. To
make it more relevant for the villagers that I was speaking to and the leaders that I was speaking to. I didn't have to take out what AI had given me.
So, but what you're saying is you think the reason why only 10% are comfortable, because I agree with you. It's a great tool. I use it all the time in my marketing work. We've had calculators and computers and power tools, right? You're not more of a man if you use a regular saw than a.
Some men would disagree with that. I'm not one of those people.
I would say you're stupid. I'm just gonna say you're stupid, right? So it's a tool. And I use it all the time, and I think people ought to use it as a tool. Mm-hmm. But what you're saying is maybe the reason why only 10% of them are comfortable using it as a tool is because their identity is wrapped up in I spend 20 hours a week sitting at my desk with all my commentaries spread around me and all my different Bible translations spread around me, and I'm praying, and the Holy Spirit is is talking to me, and all these things. Like, that's their identity of what they do, and if AI takes that away a little bit, then they start having a little bit of identity crisis.
That, yes. So that, and I don't know how authentic pastors are with their congregations in the first place. Like I think on the inward place, so the pastors that I know, I run around with pastors on a daily basis, that there are the highfalutin ones, the ones that take themselves very self-seriously, the ones that will actively regurgitate what they are researching and studying for their Sunday scripture. So there are those gas bags, those guys out there. Like, I don't really care.
Gas bag.
I don't know. Like, I did not need to know your interpretation of Hebrew in this topic. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about right now. But good on you.
So it's a little bit of the puffing up.
Oh, absolutely. That's what I'm referring to. Those people that are like, I don't care that you're researching. I don't go to your church. I don't care what you're preaching about. We're here to talk about this.
I see.
So they're
kind of hijacking the moment.
Absolutely. To just flaunt what they are actively doing. But I think, like, who knows who's actually responding to these Barna polls?
Right.
I don't know.
There's a certain hijacking the moment to pimp their book
large
Jezebel.
Oh dear! Call back. Go listen for
episode 1,
week 1. But beyond that, I think there is an unknown, like, for whoever's listening. But I think even for me, I don't know the pastor's process for what do they go through to then deliver the sermon on Sunday. And if the congregation thinks that or knows that I'm using AI to create it, they will think I'm an inferior person or I'm an inferior
it's an identity
position.
Yeah.
And so, like, to me, I have no issue if the pastor would actively sit there and say, I'm leveraging AI to shortcut some of my sermon writing so that I have more time to do X, Y, Z, so that I have more time to serve the community, so that I have more time to figure out, go to hospital visits, be there, actively do counseling with my congregation. Mm-hmm. Great. But the fact that this research was put together.
Do you think some of them, Jason, they don't really want to have that time back for those things? Because again, if their identity is so much and wrapped up as, well, my time is spent writing my sermon every week and I don't have time for these other things. If they suddenly have time for those other things, then that means they have to do them.
Sure.
And I'm not trying to pick at every pastor here. I'm just trying to get an idea of why this might be the case.
Yeah, and it was a stark thing where you have the very obvious, I'm open to it, and then very seriously, no, I'm not for this,
right?
And it's that dichotomy there is just confusing to me, because then with the last statistic that I had read, with the amount of people that are interested in being taught by the pastors. So with that Gen Z, 57% would like to hear. And then I didn't keep reading because I felt like I had read a lot. But I have more to that quote. So that there's also a desire among older Christians to hear from their church about how to use AI well. 44% of Gen Xers and 36% of Christian boomers want to hear from their pastor on using AI wisely. And so
that's interesting. I mean, I think behind that, it's just anytime something new comes around that has this kind of change and effect on society, people want to know, am I using this in an ethical manner? Am I doing this morally, or is there an immoral? And I guess I would say AI is like most things. You can use it to do good, or you could use it to do bad. You could use it ethically or unethically. But probably that's what's behind that. They're just wanting to get some guidance.
Well, but then we really get into the conversation of, okay, what is happening on a Sunday morning? What is the pastor's role? Because obviously AI, in my mind, is a meta conversation that's taking place over our entire nation and around the world, mm-hmm. where whether it be with the actor strike and all these other things that are going on, where, okay, there is the potential that AI could take over. I'm personally I'm not concerning myself with...
You don't mean like take over like apocalyptic
Well,
kind of movie.
that's what I was saying. I'm not going to concern myself with the idea of the Terminator coming around and shooting. But, okay, yeah, will screenwriters be replaced? Will actors be replaced? It could replace certain
jobs.
But
automation's been doing that for years, right? I mean...
Eli
Whitney's cotton gin.
Sure, and the amount of people, realistically, like if we poll all of America, how many of citizens actively use AI and even on a basic level understand it?
Yeah.
I think it's very minimal, and at least that's what I think of right now. And the people that are using it are students that want a shortcut, and that's what gets leveraged. There's the people that want to leverage it as a tool, and then there's the active and maybe I'm way overgeneralizing this, but it's these hot topics that get leveraged because they're sticking points and they're hot topics that can be leveraged as fear tactics or whatever it is. But if we're really basing it on the efficacy and its value, to me, I want to come back to the idea of what is the purpose of church in and of itself. And
so what you're saying is the AI, if it takes away some of the shimmer and the light of, I've got a super pastor who is really good at writing sermons and delivering sermons, but then a guy over here who maybe naturally is not so good at that can use AI to sort of bridge the gap a little bit, right?
Sure.
So, you don't have...
Then it levels things.
You don't have to be...
Maybe.
You don't have to be Stephen Furtick or Andy Stanley or whatever. You don't have to be a big personality.
Okay.
You can still... So I hear you're saying maybe that's... But that's not a good thing. That's not what we would want to desire in church. Now I think it's important to distinguish that. I think you and I would both agree that a pastor shouldn't lie about it, right? He shouldn't come off as if he's writing his own stuff and he's spitting 30 hours at the desk slaving away, when in reality he just spent 6 hours and he spent the other playing golf or something like that, right? You don't want to do that.
Sure, there's the whole plagiarism, and so and
students, like if the teacher says you need to write this originally, then you need to follow the rules.
Follow the rules,
yeah.
and so that I guess what you balance is, okay, if I'm grabbing Craig Rochelle sermon and just using his entire sermon, just switching up some of his examples based on his personal life or whatever it is.
That's plagiarism. That's different than AI.
But AI in and of itself, if all somebody's going to do is regurgitate what the computer's putting out to you, and you're not competent in basic understanding of scripture or theology, then you might have an issue. Like, those are bad pastors. And so to me, that's where I'm an all out. I'll just flat out say, okay, if you have integrity and you're transparent in how you're leveraging it, then in my opinion, church leverage the crap out of it and figure out how to become the best version of an Acts 2 community. That's my personal bias.
Yeah, wait till we have AI worship leaders. It'll happen.
Maybe.
You'll just have a computer voice.
And if that happens, show me your congregation. Because at the end of the day...
They're going to look like the people from WALL-E.
Because to me, so much of the church has just been misguided because you're pulling off programs, you're doing all this, and so you see the need to make it better and better and better and better. Yeah. But that's a side point, a side issue towards, okay, this is a distraction in the midst of trying to AI
cannot replace children's pastors because AI doesn't have the ability to stare down little tyrants.
Well, I don't know. You have a robot. That could be pretty intimidating. But yes,
no, I get your point. I'm just picking at you a lot here.
So where do we land? So like, to me, part of where I land is, hey, leverage it to the best of your ability, and be transparent about it.
Be transparent. Be ethical about it. Yeah.
And see where your congregation is at with it. Mm-hmm. And if your congregation is against it, have an authentic conversation around why.
Right. To try to understand why. Right.
Because
they want you to be. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, because to me, that's part of it. There's these expectations that get placed on pastors that, okay, this is what they're off doing in the middle of the week. I don't know what he's off doing. Like, he's just over there. He's doing it. And then I come on Sunday and I listen to him.
Oh, Pastor, it was such a good sermon.
But like, that's secondary. Like, all congregation members, in my mind, should know what the pastor's actively doing. Like, you're tithing, you're an active participant in this community, it should feel authentic. And so the fact that I believe it's possible to be authentic and have AI at the same time. I totally feel that.
Put that on that t-shirt.
There we go. Authenticity. Jason holding both at the same time. All right. So
Authentic
there
AI.
you go. I don't know if we got anywhere
Jason's
with that.
living
but-
the authentic AI life.
Oh, and I guess beyond that, listen to your congregation. So like that was the last statistic. Like with the 14% of the pastors not seeing it as relevant to talk to their congregation. Like, no. Like have these active conversations and real conversations as to how to actively use what's coming up in culture. And
Isn't that one of the most obvious things that we learn in the Bible is how, Jewish idioms, the way things were taught, the rabbis, the way they taught things, and then by extension, Jesus.
Yeah, and
the
you see the sarcasm of Jesus.
But everything was taught through a lens of culture, like a very agrarian culture. So that's why there's a lot about planting and harvesting, and like people understand these terms. Everything was taught through the lens of what people understood. And I'm with you. If your church is like, here's something that's going on in a culture, and we're curious about it, how are the ethical, moral implications of that? And then you as a pastor saying, I don't want to touch that.
Exactly.
Well, you're pushing yourself into irrelevance of that.
Yeah, and whether it be political issues, whether it be whatever, and like whether it be on abortion, whether it be on who to vote for, and all these different things, like you hear so often, okay, we're going to sidestep that, or we're not going to talk about that. Right. Well, then your relevancy for me, that's when you stop being relevant at the end of the day, for me personally.
Right.
And I'd expect that out of a pastor, but I will leave it. So I just pulled up one of my favorite verses. Okay. And I think it ties in this concept. So James 3.
Good place to
land the plane, maybe. Right. So James 3:13. Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom.
Good stuff.
That's Discord and Harmony for the week.
All right. See you next time.
Blessings.